Welcome to the deep dive. Ever feel like there's this invisible weather system inside you, coloring everything you see and do?
That's a good way to put it.
That's what we're tackling today. Mood. It's so fundamental to being human, yet, well, surprisingly tricky to pin down.
Definitely.
We've sifted through a mountain of fascinating stuff for you, from how AI is trying to decode our inner states to the latest in psychology and brain science, even ancient wisdom and, how different cultures view our inner feelings.
Yeah, a real mix of perspectives.
Our mission today, to give you a real shortcut to understanding this core part of ourselves, we're going to unpack what mood is, like deep down, how it works biologically and personally.
How we experience it, how it shows up.
Exactly. And its role in our social lives, history, its surprisingly broad impact, and finally, what artificial intelligence is starting to tell us about it.
Right, lots to cover.
Get ready for some aha moments.
Okay, let's unpack this.
It truly is like an internal weather system. We all experience it, but trying to define it precisely can be, well, elusive.
Right. Our analysis, drawing from AI research as well as, psychological and neuroscience studies, really emphasizes the need to distinguish between mood, emotion, and maybe this broader concept of affect, the feeling of feeling itself.
Okay.
The American Psychological Association defines mood as a disposition to respond emotionally in a particular way that may last for hours, days, or even weeks, perhaps at a low level, and without the person knowing what prompted the state.
Hours, days, or weeks.
Wow. Yeah. And what's particularly interesting is how AI seems to struggle with this more sustained, less intense quality of mood compared to, say, the sharper, more easily identifiable nature of emotions.
Sustained and less intense. Those are key differences, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us a clearer picture of how mood and emotion differ?
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Emotions are often like short bursts, a sudden surge of joy, maybe a quick flash of anger. Moods, on the other hand, are more like the background hum of our emotional experience. They tend to last much longer. Hours, even days, sometimes weeks, like the definition said.
Yeah.
And while an intense emotion can really grab your attention like a jolt, moods are usually less powerful, more like a persistent undercurrent.
Okay.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about what sets them off. Emotions typically have a clear trigger. Someone says something hurtful, you receive good news, that kind of thing.
Yeah, cause and effect.
Right. But moods can be more mysterious. You might wake up feeling irritable or, unusually optimistic without any obvious reason.
That totally makes sense. It's like a specific event causes a storm, but sometimes the whole day just feels overcast for no clear reason.
Exactly. And despite this more subtle nature, mood exerts a really powerful influence. It colors how we see things, what motivates us, the decisions we make, how we interact with others, even how we process information. We try to measure mood through questionnaires where people report how they're feeling, or by observing their behavior, looking at physiological signs like heart rate, or using specific mood scales. Interestingly, while we know certain brain areas are heavily involved in specific emotions, like the amygdala, often associated with fear, the brain basis of mood is, well, less clearly localized. It seems to involve more widespread brain activity.
So it's less like a specific switch being flipped and more like a general shift in the brain's overall activity.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Now, let's touch on this broader idea of affect. In psychology, it's the general term for the subjective experience of feeling, so it includes both moods and emotions.
Okay, the umbrella term.
Right. But some philosophers, like Spinoza, viewed something called affectus as even more fundamental, a kind of raw, pre-personal intensity, our basic capacity to be affected by and to affect the world around us.
Pre-personal intensity.
Yeah, that sounds deep.
It is. And what's fascinating is that AI, in its current state, really struggles with this fuzziness of mood, and especially with capturing that raw, embodied sense of affect. It's much better at modeling those discrete, triggered emotions. Because AI likes clear data points, right? It's harder for it to model something that's ongoing, not super intense, and doesn't have a clear cause and effect relationship.
Precisely. AI thrives on distinct features and well-defined data. Mood's subtle, longer-lasting nature requires analyzing much more data over time and picking up on less obvious patterns.
Makes sense.
And that philosophical idea of affectus, that fundamental capacity to feel. Current AI models, which focus on analyzing external signals, can't really grasp that inner embodied experience. It's like trying to understand the taste of something by just looking at its ingredients list.
Okay, so mood is this longer-lasting, less intense, often untriggered background feeling that has a big impact on everything. And AI is still trying to get its digital arms around it, especially that gut feeling aspect.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, philosophers like Damasio see mood as a fundamental backdrop to our consciousness, deeply intertwined with interoception.
Perception,
Yeah.
that's our body's inner sense, right?
Okay.
Like feeling your heartbeat.
Precisely. Your heartbeat, your stomach rumbling, that sort of thing. And this raises a really important question. If mood is so fundamental to our conscious experience, how can AI, which doesn't have subjective feelings in the same way we do, truly understand it?
That's a huge question. And this lack of a specific target for many moods, that's philosophically interesting too, isn't it? Like if you're angry at something, but if you just feel generally down, what's the target of that feeling?
That's a key philosophical puzzle. Unlike emotions that usually have a clear object, you're happy about something, sad about something else, moods often seem to just be there without a specific focus.
Right.
This poses a real challenge for theories of consciousness that try to explain our subjective experience by what that experience is about. How do you explain a feeling that isn't really directed at anything in particular? For AI, which works by processing specific inputs to get specific outputs, this undirectedness is a major hurdle. Its knowledge is built on defined things and their relationships. How do you ground a feeling of melancholy that just is?
It's like trying to point to thin air.
Right.
And that feeling that mood comes from inside us, coloring everything we see into AI, can't really replicate that internal experience, can it?
No. That subjective feeling of mood, that sense of it originating from within us, is something current AI models just can't access.
Okay.
They can analyze the external signs of mood, our behavior, our body language, our words, but not that first-person experience of feeling it.
Right.
So while an AI might get very good at predicting how someone in a bad mood might act, it's not understanding what it feels like to be in a bad mood. It's seeing the effects, not having the experience.
Right. It's like seeing the shadow, not the object itself. And then there's the link between mood and our sense of who we are. It's like mood provides the emotional tone to our whole being.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Damasio argues that our sense of self is built upon feelings about our body's internal state, making mood deeply connected to how we experience ourselves. Even ancient thinkers like Plato and Aristotle explored the role of emotions and this concept of thymos, that spiritedness, seen as the heart's role in feeling, desire, and even courage within the human soul.
Thymos. Spiritedness.
Interesting.
All of this points to a fundamental challenge for AI that doesn't have a body or a sense of self in the way humans do. How can it truly grasp something so tied to our embodied experience?
It's like asking a bird to describe what it's like to swim. So mood is this pervasive background feeling, shaping everything from our thoughts to our actions. It's not just a minor emotional detail, it's a central player in the whole human experience.
Precisely. Its influence is incredibly widespread, affecting our thoughts, how we see the world, what we remember, what motivates us, how we behave, and even our sense of self-awareness.
Wow.
This makes it a really critical factor in understanding how individuals think and how groups of people behave. For AI that aims to be truly intelligent and interact with us in a meaningful way, it's essential to account for mood as something that changes and has a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Without that, their models of human behavior will always be incomplete and, well, might not be very useful in real-world situations.
Okay, so we have a better handle on what mood is and isn't from both a psychological and philosophical perspective, and we see how AI is beginning to try and understand it. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the biological and developmental foundations of mood. Where does this all originate in our bodies, and how does it change as we go through life?
Right. The biology of mood is remarkably complex. It involves a delicate interplay of different brain regions, chemical messengers called neurotransmitters, and hormones.
Okay.
At the core of how we process emotions is the limbic system, with key areas like the amygdala, which is often involved in processing threats, the hippocampus, important for memory, and the cingulate cortex, which links our emotions and our thinking. What's really interesting is how these areas communicate with the prefrontal cortex.
The PSC, right, the control center.
Exactly. Crucial for regulating our emotional responses. Studies have shown that the connections between these brain regions can be different in people who experience mood disorders. The insula, that brain region we mentioned, associated with our internal bodily sensations interoception, is also thought to be very important in contributing to our subjective feelings and, consequently, our mood.
So it's not just about what's going on in our heads, it's deeply connected to what's happening throughout our bodies.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the chemical side of things, neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine are key players.
The big three.
Kind of, yeah. Serotonin is often linked to maintaining a stable mood, and low levels have been implicated in conditions like depression, anxiety, and even aggressive behavior.
Okay.
Dopamine plays a significant role in our experience of reward and pleasure, and imbalances in dopamine are seen in both depression and mania.
Right. The highs and lows.
Norepinephrine is involved in our alertness and stress responses, and low levels are also associated with depression. Even GABA, which is the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter.
The calming one.
Sort of, yeah. It's thought to be out of balance in anxiety disorders, which often occur alongside mood problems. AI is starting to build models of these neurotransmitter systems as dynamic factors, trying to simulate how changes in these chemicals might affect how a simulated brain works.
So they're essentially creating virtual brains and tweaking the virtual serotonin levels to see what happens. That sounds pretty cutting edge. What about hormones? We always hear about hormones having a big impact on our moods.
They certainly do. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is a big one. Chronically high levels are linked to depression.
Right.
Then you have oxytocin, often referred to as the bonding hormone, which promotes positive feelings and social connection.
The cuddle hormone.
Exactly. Endorphins, our natural pain relievers, can also have mood-boosting effects. And even thyroid hormones can play a role, with imbalances sometimes associated with depression. AI could potentially use data from wearable devices that track things like cortisol levels over time to get a more comprehensive picture of someone's mood pattern.
Okay, wearables.
Yeah. And the autonomic nervous system, which controls our involuntary bodily functions like heart rate and digestion, also plays a significant role through its sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest branches. AI is being used to analyze things like heart rate variability, HRV, and electrodermal activity, EDA, which reflect the activity of the system and can be indicators of our emotional state.
So tracking stress levels, basically.
Essentially, yeah. And here's a really fascinating area of ongoing research: the connection between the bacteria in our gut, the microbiota, and our brain.
The gut-brain axis.
That's it. And also the role of inflammation in the nervous system. Emerging evidence suggests these factors have links to mood disorders.
Wow.
AI could potentially be used to analyze data from the gut microbiome or markers of inflammation to help predict someone's risk for mood issues.
It's incredible how interconnected everything is. Brain, body, even our gut bacteria. It's like a huge, complex system influencing our mood. And AI is trying to process all that information at once.
Precisely. And genetics also plays a substantial role. Mood disorders tend to run in families, indicating a strong genetic component.
Right.
While it's not usually a single gene responsible, we now know that many different genes, each with a small effect, can contribute to our susceptibility to mood-related problems.
Polygenic risk, they call it.
Exactly. Having a close relative with a mood disorder is a significant factor that increases someone's risk. This is an area where AI is proving to be incredibly valuable. It can analyze the vast amounts of genetic data from large-scale studies.
Like GWAS.
Yes, genome-wide association studies. AI can identify these complex patterns of multiple genes influencing a trait, something that's very difficult for humans to do on their own.
So it's not just about what we inherit, but also how those genes interact with our environment.
Exactly. Gene-environment interactions are really crucial. Someone might have a genetic predisposition to a mood disorder, but it might take an environmental trigger, such as significant stress or difficult experiences in childhood, for that predisposition to actually manifest.
Okay, so genes love the gun, environment pulls the trigger kind of thing.
That's a common analogy, yeah. For example, certain variations in a gene involved in serotonin transport, the 5-HTTLPR gene, combined with stressful life events, increase the likelihood of developing depression. AI is being used to model these incredibly intricate interactions. We're also discovering that there are genetic overlaps between different mental health conditions like mood disorders, schizophrenia, anxiety, ADHD, suggesting they might share some underlying biological pathways.
Interesting.
AI can help us identify these shared genetic markers, which could lead to a more unified understanding of mental illness. Even epigenetics.
That's how our environment changes how genes are expressed, right?
Exactly, without changing the DNA sequence itself. Environmental factors like stress can cause these changes. AI is being used to integrate this layer of information as well. Ultimately, mood appears to be an emergent property, something that arises from this incredibly complex and adaptive system.
It's mind-boggling how many layers there are to it. Now, what about how mood changes as we go through life? Is there any truth to the stereotype of the moody teenager, or is it more complicated than that?
Mood is definitely not a stable thing throughout our lives. Even from the time we're born, we see individual differences in what we call temperament. These are our innate tendencies and how we react emotionally.
Like being a fussy baby or an easy baby?
Pretty much. Researchers like Chess and Thomas identified different temperamental styles, such as easy, slow to warm up, and difficult. While these early tendencies can be somewhat consistent, we do learn to regulate our emotions and moods as we mature. Interestingly, there's theoretical work being done on using AI to try and model early temperament based on things like a baby's cry patterns.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, but this raises some really important ethical considerations, as you can imagine.
I can see why. Labeling a baby's temperament based on AI analysis feels like it could have unintended consequences.
It does. Now, when we look at older adults, there's a phenomenon called the paradox of well-being.
The paradox of well-being, what's that?
Despite often experiencing age-related challenges and losses, many older adults report surprisingly good moods and high levels of life satisfaction.
Huh. Why is that?
Well, they tend to experience more of those calmer, positive emotions, like contentment, and less of both high-energy and low-energy negative emotions. This might be because as we age, we often shift our focus towards emotionally meaningful experiences.
The socio-emotional selectivity theory, right?
Exactly. And there's this positivity effect where we tend to remember positive things more readily. Plus, frankly, we've just had more practice in managing our emotions over the years.
Makes sense.
However, it's important to remember that this isn't the case for everyone. Some older adults do experience more negative mood trajectories, which could be linked to factors like slower cognitive processing or higher levels of anxiety or neuroticism.
Right.
AI could potentially be used to personalize interventions for these individuals, such as tailored cognitive training programs or attention bias modification to help manage negative mood.
So our life experiences can actually make us better at navigating our emotional states. That's a hopeful thought.
It appears so for many, and looking at mood across the entire lifespan really highlights that it's a dynamic, constantly evolving process.
Yeah.
AI's ability to model these developmental changes, taking into account everything from our initial temperament to the various experiences we have throughout life, offers a powerful way to understand mood, not as a fixed trait, but as something that continuously adapts and changes.
Right.
This long-term perspective is crucial for developing mental health care that is more timely and tailored to the specific challenges and needs of different stages of life.
Okay, so we have a better understanding of the biological and developmental underpinnings of mood. Now, how do we actually perceive and experience these internal states, both in ourselves and in others? What are the ways we sense mood?
That's a really insightful way to think about it. We perceive mood through a variety of sensory channels, and AI is increasingly trying to tap into these as well.
Okay.
Visually, we pick up on facial expressions, like the facial action coding system, FACS, body posture, and even the context of a situation to infer how someone is feeling. AI uses computer vision to analyze these visual cues.
Right, reading faces and body language.
Exactly. Auditory cues are also incredibly important. The tone of someone's voice, its rhythm, its pitch, prosody, basically.
Oh.
And even nonverbal sounds like sighs or laughs can tell us a lot about their mood. AI uses voice analysis to try and decode these auditory signals. Even our sense of smell and taste can be linked to mood through associations and memories.
Like comfort food.
Exactly. Although AI applications in these areas are still in their early stages.
So when I reach for a certain comfort food, it's not just about the taste, but also the happy memories and the feeling of comfort it brings back.
Precisely. But perhaps most fundamentally, we experience mood through our own bodies. This is where somatic perception and interoception come into play.
Okay, the body again.
Yes. Theories like the James Lange theory and the facial feedback hypothesis suggest that our conscious experience of mood is partly a result of us perceiving our own bodily changes.
So smiling actually makes you feel happier.
Well, the idea is that even forcing a smile might slightly improve your mood. Yeah. AI is exploring this by having robots mimic human expressions and seeing if it influences their internal representations of their state.
Wow.
Interoception, which, as we mentioned earlier, is our ability to sense our internal bodily signals like our heartbeat and breathing, is also being increasingly recognized as central to our experience of mood.
And the insula is key there.
Yes, the insula plays a key role in processing these internal signals. AI systems that use biosensors to track things like heart rate, skin temperature, and so on are essentially trying to get external measures that reflect these internal interoceptive signals.
That's right.
It really highlights that mood is deeply rooted in our physical being. And it's a two-way street. Our expressions can influence our experience, and our experience shapes our expressions.
Right.
AI avatars are even being designed with feedback loops to mimic this. For example, an AI that displays a happy facial expression might have that visual cue reinforce a more positive internal state within its programming.
So even for an AI, putting on a happy face might actually make it feel a bit more happy in its own way. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
But surely cultural differences play a huge role in how we interpret these cues. A smile in one culture might mean something very different in another.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. Cultural factors have a profound influence on how we perceive both mood and emotion. For example, some cultures might pay more attention to the eyes when trying to read someone's emotional state, while others focus more on the mouth. The context of a situation is also incredibly important. The same facial expression in different social situations can convey very different meanings. This poses a significant challenge for AI.
Yeah, context is everything.
It might be able to detect a smile, but without understanding the surrounding context, is it a genuine smile of happiness, a polite smile, or even a sarcastic smile? Its interpretation can be completely wrong. AI needs to be able to integrate information about the situation and cultural norms to get better at accurately perceiving mood.
So it's not just about analyzing faces and voices in isolation. It's about understanding the whole human story behind them. Now, how does our mood actually affect how we think? Does being in a good mood make us more creative, or does being grumpy make us more focused on details?
Mood has a really significant impact on our cognitive functions. It influences what we pay attention to, how we perceive the world around us, what we remember, and even our experience of time.
Cool.
When it comes to attention, our emotions, and by extension our mood, act like a filter, making us focus on certain things while we might overlook others. Emotionally charged information tends to grab our attention more easily. Specific moods can even alter our basic perceptual processes. For example, studies have shown that people in a sad mood might perceive certain visual illusions differently.
Yeah, like optical illusion.
Yeah. Positive moods often broaden our attentional focus, making us see the bigger picture, more global processing, and potentially biasing us towards positive information.
Okay, seeing the world through rose-tinted glasses.
Sort of. Negative moods, on the other hand, tend to narrow our focus, making us more detail-oriented, more local processing, and perhaps more vigilant for potential threats. AI models of attention are starting to incorporate these mood-related factors to simulate how these biases might occur in artificial systems.
So a more positive AI might be better at brainstorming and generating new ideas, while a more negative or focused AI might be better at tasks that require careful attention to detail.
That's a great way to think about it. And when it comes to memory, mood plays a crucial role in both how we encode new information and how we recall things we've learned in the past.
Okay.
There's something called mood congruent memory, which means we tend to remember things that are consistent with our current mood.
So if you're sad, you remember sad things.
Exactly. So if you're feeling down, you're more likely to recall sad memories. This can unfortunately create a negative feedback loop in conditions like depression.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's also mood-dependent memory, where you might recall information better if your mood at the time of remembering is similar to your mood when you first learned it.
Interesting. So study happy, take the test happy.
That's the basic idea, yeah. AI learning systems could potentially leverage this in how they store and retrieve information. Then there's our perception of time.
Oh yeah, time flies when you're having fun.
Exactly. We all know how time seems to fly when we're enjoying ourselves and drag when we're bored or unhappy. Negative moods like depression and anxiety often lead to an overestimation of time, making it feel like time is passing more slowly. Even highly arousing emotions, whether positive or negative, can distort our sense of time. Models like the attentional gait model try to explain this. The insula seems involved here too.
Right.
This is something that AI systems that interact with us over extended periods might need to be aware of. An AI companion, designed to have long conversations, for example, might need to adjust its pacing based on how the user's mood is affecting their perception of time.
That makes sense.
These back-and-forth influences between our mood and our cognitive processes are really significant. A negative mood can make us focus on negative information, which in turn can reinforce the negative mood.
That feedback loop again.
Right. AI designed for mental well-being might need to specifically try and interrupt these kinds of cycles, maybe through things like attentional bias modification.
It sounds like our inner emotional world isn't just a passive backdrop. It's actively shaping how we experience reality itself. from what we notice and remember to how we perceive the very passage of time.
Exactly. And this inner landscape extends to our daydreams, our fantasies, and even the beliefs we hold.
Daydreams.
Okay.
We all do that. How does mood fit in?
Daydreaming is a very common experience, and different types of daydreams have been linked to different moods. There's positive, constructive daydreaming, which can actually boost creativity.
Okay.
Then there's guilty, dysphoric daydreaming, often associated with negative moods, and poor attentional control, mind wandering. Even feeling bored can trigger our minds to wander.
Yeah.
Interestingly, studies have shown that we tend to be less happy when our minds are wandering unless those daydreams are of a positive nature.
Huh. So happy daydreams are okay.
Seems like it. Our fantasies can also serve as coping mechanisms, helping us to fulfill unmet needs or deal with stress or isolation, sometimes called escapist daydreaming. However, for some people, this can become maladaptive, with very vivid and compulsive daydreams that interfere with their daily life. This is sometimes linked to anxiety or depression.
Maladaptive daydreaming, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Mood can also play a really significant role in the development of delusional thinking. Often, delusions arise from a state of intense emotional arousal, sometimes called a delusional mood.
Delusional mood.
It's a state where individuals might feel a heightened sense of significance or strangeness, and they try to make sense of these intense feelings by forming unusual or fixed false beliefs. Mood states are often linked to the type of delusion too, like anger with persecutory delusions.
Wow. So extreme moods can actually change your reality.
Fundamentally alter how we perceive reality and how we form our beliefs, yes. AI models that try to understand how beliefs are formed might need to take these effective tipping points into account. Even our engagement with fiction involves a kind of aesthetic illusion, where we become immersed in narratives and experience emotions as if they were real, even though we know they're not.
Right, getting lost in a book or movie.
Exactly. AI systems that generate stories or other creative content might aim to tap into this, recognizing the interplay with the user's current mood.
So our inner world is this constant interplay between our mood and our thoughts, memories, and even our imagination, sometimes in healthy and adaptive ways, and sometimes in ways that can lead us down negative paths or even to a distorted perception of reality.
Precisely. And this inner world doesn't exist in isolation. Our mood has a profound impact on how we interact with other people and the broader society we live in.
That makes perfect sense. You can almost feel the mood shift in a room when someone walks in with bad news, or when a genuinely happy person starts telling a funny story. So how exactly does mood ripple through our social world?
One of the key ways is through emotional contagion. Moods can literally spread from person to person during an interaction.
Like yawning.
A bit like that, yeah. So an AI designed to interact with people needs to be aware its own simulated mood and how it might be influencing users, and also recognize that a user's mood might be affected by the moods of those around them.
Okay.
We humans are constantly picking up on and displaying these emotional cues, although our ability to do so effectively can vary quite a bit. AI is trying to replicate this by analyzing facial expressions, vocal tone, and the sentiment expressed in text. Empathy, which is understanding and sharing the feelings of others, is crucial here. And while the field of effective computing aims to create artificial empathy, it's currently limited by AI's lack of genuine lived experience and consciousness.
Right. It can simulate, but not really feel empathy.
Exactly. Negative moods can really complicate our social interactions, often leading to misinterpretations where we might perceive neutral statements as negative.
Yeah, reading into things when you're grumpy.
Precisely. And cultural differences in how we're expected to express our emotions, those display rules we talked about, can also lead to misunderstandings between people from different backgrounds. And AI could potentially act as a kind of mood mediator in digital communications, perhaps flagging potential misinterpretations or providing cultural context for emotional expressions.
Ooh, interesting idea.
But this raises some important ethical questions, of course.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? You want AI to be sensitive to our emotional states, but not to the point where it's trying to manipulate our feelings or police how we express ourselves.
Exactly. And mood is a really significant underlying factor in all of our relationships, arguments, and social connections. In healthy relationships, a generally positive prevailing mood is very important. Sharing our emotions tends to build closeness and strengthens bonds.
Makes sense.
The early secure attachments we form in childhood often lay the foundation for our emotional patterns in later relationships.
Right, attachment theory.
When it comes to arguments and conflicts, negative moods can make us more defensive, more critical of others, and more prone to cognitive biases that can escalate the conflict. Anger can fuel aggressive behavior, while anxiety might lead to avoidance and withdrawal. Sometimes unconscious fears and emotional patterns that developed in childhood can even play out in our adult relationship conflicts. AI could potentially be used to analyze communication patterns for negative cycles driven by mood and even predict when things might be heading towards escalation.
Ethically tricky, though.
Very. Requires careful ethical consideration and user consent. Conditions like borderline personality disorder really illustrate the damaging impact that severe and rapidly shifting moods can have on relationships, leading to instability and distorted perceptions of self and others.
Yeah.
Mood acts as a critical filter and amplifier in our interpersonal lives, and AI relationship coaches, for example, would need to be able to model these mood-biased perceptions to be truly helpful.
It sounds like understanding the emotional climate of our relationships is just as important, if not more so, than understanding the specific words being exchanged.
Absolutely. And mood also plays a significant role in how social hierarchies form and how we interact with people we perceive as being in our in-group versus those in out-groups.
Okay, how so?
Think about how mood might influence social status. Studies in primates have shown links between levels of certain neurotransmitters like serotonin and an animal's position in the social hierarchy.
Right, serotonin and status.
Humans also employ various strategies, often emotionally charged, to navigate social hierarchies, whether through displays of dominance or prestige. We also have a natural tendency to categorize people into groups.
Us versus them.
Unfortunately, yes, which can lead to favoritism towards our own group and negative biases towards those we see as different, often fueled by underlying emotions. In workplace settings, this can contribute to the formation of cliques and the marginalization of certain individuals, with unspoken moods and emotional dynamics playing a significant role. Collective emotions, shared feelings within a group can really shape how different groups relate to each other, sometimes fueling conflict and sometimes promoting cooperation. Propaganda throughout history has often been used to manipulate these collective emotions.
Yeah, definitely.
Even a general sense of anxiety or unease within a group collective angst can contribute to prejudice against other groups. AI could potentially analyze large data sets of public communication to look for markers of this kind of collective anxiety as an early warning sign of potential social friction.
Wow, that's a powerful idea.
So mood isn't just a personal experience. It actively contributes to the formation and evolution of our social structures. AI models of social behavior need to incorporate these effective drivers to be truly comprehensive.
Right.
And as AI becomes more capable of analyzing mood in social interactions, there's potential for it to perhaps mediate conflicts or offer insights into group dynamics. But again, this needs to be approached with extreme ethical caution.
The same ethical tightrope.
Exactly. Issues of privacy, potential bias in the algorithms, the risk of manipulation, and even the possibility of undermining our own ability to develop empathy are all very serious concerns that need careful consideration. It's a really fine line between potentially helpful applications and those that could be harmful or intrusive.
Yeah.
We need to be very thoughtful about how we design and implement these technologies, with transparency and user control being paramount.
It's like we're just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding this incredibly intricate dance between our individual emotional states and the vast and complex world of human society.
Precisely. And this dance isn't just a modern phenomenon. Our understanding and experience of mood have been shaped by history and culture in truly fascinating ways.
I'm really curious about that. We often think of basic emotions as being pretty universal, but what about mood? Has that been viewed and understood differently across different times and cultures?
That's a really insightful question. While some core emotions, like maybe happiness or anger, do seem to have universal facial expressions that are recognized across different cultures.
Yeah.
Ekman's work, for instance.
Right, the basic emotion.
Mood is much more deeply influenced by culture. Culture shapes how we feel, how we're expected to express those feelings, how we label them with language, what value we place on different moods, and how we interpret the moods of others.
Okay.
AI models that are often trained primarily on Western data need to be very cautious about assuming their understanding of mood is universally applicable.
Good point. Big bias potential there.
Huge. Think about what are known as display rules. These are the culturally learned norms about when, where, and how it's appropriate to show our emotions and moods.
Right, like the stiff upper lip.
Exactly. Or suppressing negative emotions in some collectivist cultures versus more open expression in individualistic ones. Even something like the expression of anger can have different social consequences depending on the specific cultural context. These display rules act like a kind of logical filter on our feelings. AI systems need to somehow learn and model these nuanced rules to avoid misinterpreting behaviors, for example. Understanding that someone's stoicism might reflect a cultural norm rather than a lack of feeling. It's a real challenge for AI.
Yeah, learning those unwritten rules.
Cultures also differ in the level of emotional arousal they tend to value. Western cultures often value high-energy, positive emotions like excitement, while some Eastern cultures might place more emphasis on calmer, low-arousal positive states like serenity or contentment. This concept of ideal affect has implications for what we even consider to be a desirable mood.
Ideal affect. Interesting.
AI systems that aim to promote well-being would need to be very sensitive to these cultural preferences and avoid imposing mythnocentric definitions of what constitutes a positive emotional state. And, of course, language itself plays a crucial role in how we categorize and understand our moods. Different languages provide different vocabularies for describing our inner emotional states, with some having very nuanced terms that don't have direct equivalents in other languages.
Like Schadenfreude or something.
Exactly. Or maybe less well-known examples specific to certain cultures. Even how we visually perceive emotional cues can vary, as we discussed earlier. Some cultures might focus more on the mouth when reading emotions, while others pay more attention to the eyes.
It sounds like trying to build a one-size-fits-all AI model of mood that works across all cultures would be like trying to create a single perfect recipe that everyone in the world would love. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly. And when we look back through history, we find some truly fascinating perspectives on mood. In ancient Greece and Rome, the dominant theory was the humoral theory.
The four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile.
That's the one attributed to Hippocrates and Galen. They proposed that our moods were determined by the balance of these four bodily fluids. An excess of black bile, for example, is thought to cause melancholy.
Melancholy.
Yeah.
Black bile. Makes sense etymologically.
Right, leading to feelings of sadness, fear, and other negative states. They even had specific dietary recommendations aimed at restoring the balance of these humors.
Wow. Food as medicine even then.
Philosophers like the Stoics and Epicureans placed a strong emphasis on achieving inner tranquility, what they called apatheia and ataraxia, through the use of reason and self-control.
Apatheia. Like apathy.
More like equanimity, freedom from disturbance. Ataraxia is tranquility. They saw managing turbulent emotions like anxiety as essential for living a good life. Seneca wrote a lot about focusing on the present moment. The ancient Greeks even had that concept we mentioned, thymos, often understood as spiritedness or the heart as the seat of emotions like desire, will, courage, and anger.
Right, thymos.
The Romans also described various mood states like anxiety, which they called anxietas or anger, sadness, tristitia, and anger, ira, in ways that actually resonate quite strongly with our modern understanding of these experiences. They also recognize states of joy, gaudium laetitia.
So even thousands of years ago, people were actively thinking about and trying to manage their inner emotional landscapes. What about other ancient cultures?
In ancient Egypt, the concept of ma'at was very important. It represented cosmic order, truth, justice, balance, and harmony.
Ma, the goddess with the feather.
That's her symbol, yes. Living in accordance with Ma'at was believed to lead to well-being and a lighter heart, characterized by inner quietude and a spirit of cooperation. While Ma'at itself wasn't a mood, it represented a state of being conducive to positive emotional states.
Okay.
They also had the concept of Heika, which was a form of magic seen as the force that sustained Ma'at. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptian language had a lexicon for different affective states, although the precise mapping is still debated by Egyptologists. Words like high for gladness, merit for love.
Fascinating.
In early modern European philosophy, there was often a distinction made between passions, seen as turbulent, bodily, often conflicting with reason, reflecting that Stoic influence and affections, considered calmer, more refined, often associated with virtuous movements of the soul or will.
Passions versus affections. Subtle distinction.
Yeah. These historical ideals, like the Stoic ataraxia and the Egyptian concept of ma'at, can be seen as early forms of mood regulation strategies, emphasizing long-term inner equilibrium achieved through ethical conduct, reason, and even spiritual practices. They might even offer inspiration for some AI well-being interventions today.
It's really fascinating to see how different cultures and different eras have grappled with these fundamental aspects of the human experience. It definitely gives us a broader perspective on our current understanding.
It does, and it's not just individual moods that have shaped history. Collective moods have also acted as powerful forces in shaping economic behavior, cultural trends, political movements, and even the zeitgeist of entire eras.
The mood of the times.
Exactly. The collective memory of emotionally significant events can even form the basis of societal norms and beliefs. AI could potentially be used to analyze historical data, things like literature, public writings, economic indicators to try and quantify and model the impact of these collective moods.
Example.
Think about the Roaring '20s and the United States' widespread optimism fueled by new technologies and prosperity, but also masking underlying anxieties about rapid social change, prohibition, race relations, a fragility revealed by the 1929 crash.
Right. Then the Depression.
Exactly. The deep pessimism, anxiety, and despair of the Great Depression profoundly impacted American society and politics, leading to the New Deal.
Ah.
Then you had the post-World War II era, characterized by a general sense of optimism and confidence, the baby boom, consumerism, followed by the anxieties of the Cold War era, fear of the Soviets, nuclear war, communist infiltration shaking culture and policy.
Yeah, the Red Scare.
Even more recently, the initial euphoria surrounding the fall of the Berlin Wall in Europe.
Huge moment.
Absolutely. But it was followed by a period of destabilization and uncertainty for many in the Eastern Bloc as economies crashed. A short-lived positive mood in some ways. These examples really illustrate that collective moods are complex, dynamic, often contain various sub-moods within them, and transition over time. AI analysis of diverse historical data could potentially help us detect these more nuanced collective emotional states, and even predict transitions, moving beyond a simplistic idea of a uniform societal mood.
It's like the emotional undercurrent of history, shaping everything from economic booms and busts to major social and political shifts.
Exactly, and this pervasive influence of mood extends to so many different areas of our lives, from our personal health and well-being to large-scale global events.
Let's delve into that a bit more. How does our mood specifically impact our physical and mental health?
The connection here is really significant and works in both directions. We know that physical activity, for example, can have a positive impact on our mood through various biological mechanisms.
Endorphins and such?
Endorphins, neurotransmitters, better sleep, improved self-esteem, reduced tension. Yeah. For individuals experiencing mild to moderate depression, exercise can even be as effective as some traditional treatments.
That's powerful.
Conversely, experiencing chronic negative moods, such as those associated with depression, is linked to an increased risk of developing various physical health problems, including cardiovascular disease.
Right, the mind-body connection.
Absolutely. Even acute negative emotions can have a temporary weakening effect on our immune system. This really underscores the importance of health platforms, including those powered by AI, taking a holistic view that integrates both mental and physical well-being monitoring. Mood is also a core feature of mood disorders like major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, seasonal affective disorder, SAD, and cyclothymia. We also see a high rate of comorbidity.
Meaning they happen together.
Right. These mood disorders often occur alongside other mental health conditions, such as anxiety disorders. Having one disorder can sometimes increase the risk of developing another. AI-powered diagnostic tools need to be sophisticated enough to recognize these complex and overlapping patterns of symptoms, perhaps moving towards a more dimensional understanding of mental illness, rather than relying solely on rigid categories.
Beyond just checkboxes.
Exactly. By analyzing large data sets of patient information, AI might be able to identify subtle patterns and help to refine diagnostic accuracy. Furthermore, the mood of parents, particularly maternal depression, has been shown to have a significant impact on the health and development of their children.
Oh, that's tough.
It is. It can potentially lead to poorer physical health outcomes, a more difficult temperament, insecure attachment patterns, increased negative emotions, behavioral problems, and a higher risk of developing psychopathology later in life. Depressed parents may also have different interaction patterns with their children.
Right.
AI could potentially play a role in offering resources and support to parents experiencing mood difficulties, although this would need to be done with very careful ethical safeguards in place.
It's a powerful reminder that our minds and our bodies are so deeply interconnected, and that our emotional state is a really key indicator of our overall health and well-being. What about the role of mood in things like learning, education, and creativity?
Mood plays a vital, though often underestimated, role in these areas. Positive emotions, such as enjoyment and curiosity, can significantly enhance our ability to learn and retain information, as well as increase our engagement with the learning process.
Makes sense. You learn better when you're interested.
Right. Conversely, negative emotions like anxiety and boredom can really hinder learning. Interestingly, even a mild level of frustration can sometimes be productive in driving deeper learning.
Little challenge is good.
Sometimes. Our mood can even influence our perception of how difficult a task seems, what's known as our perceived cognitive load.
Yeah.
Personalized AI tutors that are able to infer a student's emotional state, perhaps through their interactions, performance, or even facial analysis with consent, could potentially adapt their teaching strategies accordingly.
How so?
Offering encouragement, hints, adjusting the difficulty level, or even suggesting calming exercises if they detect frustration or anxiety. This field is sometimes referred to as affective sensing and pedagogical reasoning.
Affective sensing.
Interesting. When it comes to creativity, there's often an observed link between what we might call moodiness and individuals who are highly creative.
The tortured artist trope.
There might be some truth to it, although it's complex. Some studies suggest a higher prevalence of mood disorders among writers and artists. While severe mood episodes can certainly impair creative output, engaging in creative work itself can sometimes have a mood-enhancing effect.
Right.
Both positive and negative moods can fuel different aspects of the creative process. Positive moods might help with brainstorming. Negative moods might fuel certain kinds of expression, like in music composition.
Okay.
Even in the realm of comedy, we see this sad clown paradox, the phenomenon of comedians who use humor as a way to cope with their own inner turmoil. Think Maria Bamford, Hannah Gadsby, John Mulaney, Robin Williams.
Yeah, many examples.
Humor can serve as a defense mechanism, a form of self-medication, a way of processing pain, gaining control. The creative process in comedy involves making unexpected associations, questioning norms, observation, experimentation. Negative mood can often serve as a rich source of material. AI tools being developed for creative endeavors, like generating images, music, or text, could potentially incorporate mood parameters based on the documented moods of human creators to try and emulate certain styles or evoke particular feelings.
So our emotional landscape isn't just something to be passively managed. It can actually be a really powerful driving force behind our ability to learn, grow, and even express ourselves creatively.
Absolutely. And the influence of mood extends far beyond our individual experiences, reaching into the realms of politics, economics, social movements, and even international conflict.
Right, you mentioned collective moods. How does that play out in, say, politics?
In politics, emotional appeals often prove to be more persuasive than detailed policy arguments in influencing voter behavior. Politicians frequently try to evoke emotions like fear, anger, and hope in their rhetoric. Social media can amplify political rage and polarization.
Definitely see that.
A leader's personal mood can even influence major decisions, including foreign policy. AI is being used to analyze political discourse for its emotional content, track shifts in public sentiment, and model this effective polarization.
Okay.
And economics.
Consumer mood and confidence are major drivers of economic activity, whether people spend or save. Stock markets are notoriously sensitive to collective sentiment, what Keynes called animal spirits. Mood can act like an irrational economic agent.
Animal spirits.
Right.
Bubbles and crashes.
Exactly. AI in economics is incorporating sentiment data from news, social media, surveys, etc. to try and improve forecasting.
What about social movements? Emotions are often the catalysts. Feelings of injustice, anger, hope, love. These are powerful motivators. Contemporary views really emphasize the role of affect in mobilization. AI can analyze manifestos, slogans, social media for emotional themes to model this.
And conflict.
Wars and conflicts are deeply shaped by collective emotions: hatred, fear, grievance. Anger can impair empathy for the other side. Propaganda deliberately manipulates these emotions.
Yeah.
AI could potentially monitor communications for hostile language as an early warning sign, or simulate emotional dynamics in conflict models. And as you said, emotions are often strategically used and manipulated in all these contexts. AI is also being developed to detect this manipulation, like coordinated inauthentic behavior online.
It's everywhere.
Finally, mood profoundly shapes our subjective experience of life in other ways, too. It influences the formation of our belief systems.
How so?
Well, anxiety might make us seek certainty, making us more receptive to certain belief systems. Beliefs are often intertwined with emotions, hot cognition. Our brains filter information based on existing beliefs. Reducing cognitive dissonance affects both mood and belief. AI could model how mood affects receptivity to things like misinformation or extremism.
Right, susceptibility to fake news.
Exactly. Heightened emotional states, especially negative ones like fear or outrage, can increase belief in misleading information and conspiracy theories. Anxiety is a key factor. Conspiracy theories often appeal to unmet needs, epistemic understanding, existential safety, social belonging. AI is being used to detect fake news and emotional manipulation tactics.
Okay, what about just daily life? Does mood change predictably?
There are often diurnal variations linked to our circadian rhythms and chronotype, whether you're a morning person or night owl. Some people experience morning depression, which is associated with more melancholic types of depression. Evening types seem to be at higher risk for depression and more severe bipolar symptoms, potentially linked to the biological clock. AI mood tracking could incorporate chronotype for personalized insights.
Morning versus evening people. Interesting. And nature. Does going outside help?
Definitely seems to. Being in nature generally has a positive impact, reducing stress, anger, improving mood, boosting confidence, promoting relaxation. Nature connectedness is linked to happiness. Ecotherapy is even used for mild depression. AI could potentially suggest nearby natural spaces if it detects low mood.
Cool idea. And finally, grief. That's a big one.
Grief and bereavement involve a complex range of moods and emotions: intense sadness, shock, denial, anger, guilt. It can resemble depression and affect physical health and behavior. It's a very individual process. AI could potentially offer resources like educational material, support group info, or journaling prompts, but this requires extreme caution and sensitivity.
Absolutely. It's almost overwhelming to consider just how deeply and broadly mood permeates every single facet of our individual lives and our collective human experience.
It truly is. And this brings us back to the interface between artificial intelligence and mood. What exactly can AI do when it comes to understanding and interacting with our emotional states?
That's the central question, isn't it? AI is becoming increasingly adept at detecting our emotions through our facial expressions, our voices, the text we write, and even our physiological responses. But how far can this technology really go in truly understanding something as nuanced as mood?
AI has certainly made notable progress in detecting mood by analyzing various signals, facial expressions via computer vision, vocal characteristics via speech analysis, text sentiment using NLP, physiological data from wearables like HRV and EDA, patterns in online behavior, even brain activity through BCIs.
Okay, lots of data sources.
Right. AI is also being used to try and model the dynamics of mood, attempting to simulate how our emotional states change in response to various internal and external factors using mathematical models. These can incorporate psychological theories about stress, coping, vulnerabilities like diathesis stress models, maybe even the hedonic treadmill idea.
So simulating mood swings, basically.
In a very simplified way, yes. Using things like differential equations or agent-based simulations to represent the interplay of factors based on theories from, say, Lewinson or Beck or Lazarus and Folkman, it's performing calculations to quantify relationships.
But there are limits.
Significant limitations, yes. Accuracy and reliability, especially in real-world, less controlled environments, are often lower than in the lab. Data quality and diversity are huge issues. Biases in training data can lead to biased performance.
Yeah, we mentioned cultural bias.
Exactly. AI really struggles with understanding the context surrounding an emotional expression, the subtle nuances of human emotion, and the fact that we often experience mixed emotions simultaneously. And most fundamentally, AI lacks subjective experience. It can identify the external signs associated with a particular mood, but it doesn't actually know what it feels like to be in that mood.
So when we talk about AI making judgments about whether a certain mood is appropriate or even dangerous, that's really just based on the patterns it has learned from the data it was trained on and the rules that humans have programmed into it, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't possess any inherent understanding of what constitutes a proper or improper emotional expression in a human sense.
Exactly. AI doesn't inherently judge propriety or danger. It's all based on its training and programming. We can try to define dangerous moods or expressions for it, things like overt aggression, physical, verbal, even relational, like harmful gossip, maybe destructive predictions influenced by severe pessimism or anxiety, or the extreme states seen in delusional mood or bipolar episodes.
Okay.
AI can potentially identify linguistic or behavioral markers often associated with these states. Some systems, like Companion MX, try to do this for mental health monitoring.
Right.
But the fine line challenge is immense. Whether an expression is appropriate or dangerous is incredibly nuanced, context-dependent, culturally influenced. Is anger in the workplace always bad? How should grief be expressed? AI, lacking deep understanding, is prone to error.
Big ethical risk there.
Huge.
Yeah.
Potential for bias, misclassification, leading to real harm maybe in employment decisions, law enforcement interactions, even social credit systems based on emotional surveillance.
Yeah.
The EU's AI Act classifies emotion recognition in certain contexts as high risk for good reason.
Right.
We must always remember that AI assessments in this area are ultimately derived from human-created data and rules, and relying on them for making nuanced ethical judgments about someone's mood without significant human oversight is potentially very dangerous.
It brings up a whole host of really critical ethical issues. The privacy of our incredibly personal emotional data, the potential for biases to be embedded in these algorithms, the risk of manipulation through emotionally targeted content, and even the broader societal impact on our own human-to-human connections if we start outsourcing our emotional understanding to AI.
Absolutely. Privacy, bias, and the potential for manipulation are major ethical considerations. Our emotional data is incredibly sensitive. We need informed consent, secure storage, maybe more local processing.
Right.
AI models can easily inherit and amplify biases present in training data. Demographic biases in facial recognition are a known example leading to unfair or discriminatory outcomes for certain groups. The possibility of using AI to emotionally target advertising or subtly influence our behavior for corporate or political gain, potentially against our own interests, erodes trust and autonomy.
Yeah, that's scary.
We also need to consider the impact on human emotional labor. If AI simulates empathy in customer service, does that devalue genuine human connection? Does it lead to impersonal, unsatisfying interactions?
Good question.
The broader societal implications of widespread emotional surveillance could be chilling, potentially stifling free expression. Who's accountable when AI makes errors? Could relying on AI erode our own empathy skills? How does AI judging moods affect how we perceive each other? Ethical development requires transparency, strong user control, data protection, proactive bias mitigation, and clear limits on use, especially avoiding manipulation and discrimination.
So while AI can help us to identify some of the factors that might trigger changes in our mood, both the internal ones like our physical state and our thoughts, and the external ones like our environment and social interactions.
Right, synthesizing those internal triggers like physiology, health status, fatigue, hunger, hormones, neurotransmitters, negative thoughts, rumination, memories, sleep quality, diet.
And the external ones like weather, light, think, city, noise, surroundings, air quality, nature, social interactions, isolation, status, discrimination, life events, world events.
Exactly. Even thinking about mood triggers in animals' environment, social factors, physical state, threats, human interaction, which we infer from their behavior.
Right.
AI needs to process all these diverse triggers, requiring multimodal input and contextual reasoning.
And I can even assist in detecting and modeling mood states. It still seems to fall short of truly being able to explain mood in the way that we, as humans, understand it.
That's a very accurate assessment. AI can identify correlates, model dynamics, detect triggers, categorize expressions, but explaining, that's harder.
Why?
Primarily, the subjective experience, the qualia, the what it's like, is inaccessible to current AI. It's good at correlation, not necessarily causation. It struggles with meaning and context. It runs headfirst into the hard problem of consciousness.
Right. Future AI might develop more sophisticated models, maybe get better at causal inference, offer more personalized explanations, integrate more deeply with neuroscience findings.
But still no feeling.
Not in the human sense. AI can contribute significantly to our scientific understanding by analyzing data, modeling processes, performing calculations about statistical relationships, making logical deductions based on learned rules. But it doesn't explain mood in the way someone who has felt that mood understands it. That experiential gap remains.
And mood itself remains a source of controversy, doesn't it, in politics, economics, relationships?
Absolutely. The use of emotional manipulation in politics, the debate over irrationality in markets driven by sentiment, the complexities of emotional labor and misinterpretation in relationships, societal norms about expressing certain moods, the stigma around mood disorders, debates over predicting dangerous moods for public safety.
Yeah. The controversy often stems from that tension between subjective, internal experience and the objective external consequences of mood-driven behavior. AI's involvement just adds layers to these controversies: privacy, bias, the ethics of AI judgment.
And that brings us to the really tricky question. When does mood cross the line? When does it become problematic or even dangerous? How do we define that boundary?
That fine line is incredibly difficult to define objectively. Appropriateness depends heavily on context behavior at a funeral versus a celebration. Intensity and duration matter sadness versus clinical depression. Cultural variations are huge, as we discussed. AI judging propriety here is fraught with challenges.
So when does it become dangerous?
Generally when it lends to harm. Anger or frustration lowering the threshold for aggression. Envy or anger driving harmful gossip or relational aggression. Severe pessimism leading to self-defeating prophecies. Collective fear or despair impacting societal function.
How far is too far?
We can think about impact on the individual mentally, through cognitive impairment or negative thought patterns leading to disorders. Physically, through health impacts or self-harm. Morally, through unethical behavior, or when fantasies become escapism that detaches from reality.
An impact on others?
Yes, community impact damaging relationships, causing social disruption, reducing productivity, leading to ethical breaches. AI's role in determining too far is extremely limited and contentious. It requires human wisdom, empathy, cultural understanding. The line is usually considered crossed when there's significant impairment in functioning, harm to self or others, or a gross deviation from norms without clear justification. Human ethical and clinical assessment remains paramount.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating and incredibly thorough deep dive into the complex world of mood, from its fundamental biological roots all the way through to its profound influence on our individual lives, our social interactions, and even the broad sweep of history and culture, and the intriguing yet still quite limited role that artificial intelligence is beginning to play in our understanding of it. It's clear that mood is so much more than just a fleeting feeling. It's a really foundational aspect of what it means to be human.
Indeed. It underpins so much of our experience, shaping our inner worlds and our engagement with the world around us in ways that we are only just beginning to fully appreciate. And while AI offers us a powerful new set of tools for studying mood, it also, I think, underscores the unique and deeply personal nature of our affective lives.
So given the profound influence of mood on our individual lives and on the fabric of society as a whole, and with the increasing capabilities of AI to detect and model these inner states, what do you think are the most important things for us as listeners and as a society to consider as we navigate this rapidly evolving landscape responsibly and ethically?
That's the core question.
What does it truly mean to understand and manage our own emotional weather and the collective emotional climate in an increasingly data-driven world? We really encourage you to continue exploring this fascinating topic and to think about the implications it has for your own life and for the world around you. Thanks so much for diving deep with us today.
This is DigitView.